Hey everyone, thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much to ARSC, the Arts Research Scholarship Committee, for inviting us to be one of their speakers. And thank you all for taking the time to join us during this really busy time of the semester. I want to acknowledge that Kayla Garvin is in the room and she won't be presenting with us today because she's very busy with her master's and full-time job at KPU, but is very much still a part of the team and is a co-author in this presentation. I also want to recognize that one of the co-investigators on this study, Emily Simpson, has joined us from BCC. And we have some other co-investigators, Suzanne Doyon from BCIT, Mono Brown from Langara, and Martha Dow from UFV, who aren't here today. But I want to acknowledge our team. We have a big team working on this, so thank you all. Our work takes place largely at KPU, which is on the unceded ancestral territories of a number of First Nations territories and peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, Semiahmoo, Katzie, Kakite, and Coquitlam peoples, and of course, the Kwantlen First Nation. Myself as a white settler, I'm joining you from Civic Campus today, so still on these shared territories. And through my, and deeply indebted to the Indigenous peoples' land on which I reside. And throughout the research project, we try to do our best to unlearn colonial systems that are embedded in the research processes, as well as the bureaucratic systems within which we operate at KPU. And we have lots to learn and unlearn in this area as well. It's an ongoing conversations for our team. I would also like to let you know that there will be discussions of homophobia, transphobia, racism, and ableism in this presentation. So I encourage you to take care of yourself, or if you need to step out, feel free. So many of you would have heard this team present on what we called phase one of this study. So this study, this large project started in 2020 when Luka Wall came to present at the Pride Advocacy Group around findings from the student satisfaction survey that showed a whole bunch of discrepancies and inequities when comparing 2SLGBTQ+ KPU students compared to other students. And so during that meeting, I was starting to conceptualize this qualitative study, this exploratory qualitative study to figure out why and what was going on. We really didn't know much or anything about KPU students at that time, aside from what we had in the student satisfaction survey. So at that time, Kayla and Sarah Schwegel, who's now gone on to law school, did interviews mostly online because it was still during COVID times with 41 2SLGBTQ+ KPU students. And we found, you've heard the presentations, we found a number of unmet needs, barriers to education, patterns of discrimination and harassment. And we also noted that there were some unique challenges discussed in these interviews, particularly by international students, students with disabilities, and BIPOC students. And at that time, we were already conceptualizing the project from an intersectional perspective. So understanding, I guess, because this team is full of our own intersectional experiences, understanding that we couldn't just necessarily carve off gender and sexuality and figure out what was going on. We had to look really broadly and nuanced about what was happening. So we felt that the design was limited in some ways in phase one, which happens in these kind of exploratory studies. So in response to that, we launched a larger study. And the objectives of this study were to address the design, the gaps in things we want to know more about in phase one, but we didn't know, and to more deeply explore the intersectional experiences of post-secondary students who are queer and trans. And we also want to expand to other teaching-focused institutions because we recognized there was something quite unique about KPU and other universities or colleges where there's more commuters, there's not necessarily a residence. We aren't as well resourced perhaps as some of the larger universities. So we really wanted to see if what was going on at KPU was consistent with other comparable institutions in the Lower Mainland. And same as our objectives from phase one, it's really important that we continue to train and present research opportunities to 2SLGBTQ KPU students in particular, and to develop recommendations and improve student experiences at KPU as well as at the other 6 universities. So how we did this, we decided that we wanted to do a mixed method design. So we spent many months under the leadership and guidance of Luka, creating a comprehensive online survey. And we also wanted to do focus groups. We still wanted to hear from participants. We still wanted to get the nuances, particularly of those intersectional experiences. So we designed it, and this was very much the students the students and team members designing this as well, this mixed method study. So we involved, there was 6 other institutions, so BCIT, Capilano, Douglas, Langara, UFV, and VCC involved in the study. We went through a lengthy harmonization research ethics process to make sure that we could recruit from all of those campuses. Our interview guide had a range of items because the experiences of being queer and trans post-secondary students intersects with things like food security and housing and access to healthcare, and whether they had SOGI education in high school, as well as substance use. And we also asked questions around overdose and the toxic drug supply. So the survey, we have a tremendous amount of data from the survey. We also did this. So we also have 17 focus groups that were run at KPU, VCC, BCIT, and Langara, but there was participants from all of the other universities in those focus groups as well. So some focus groups we called general. So we had some that were specifically KPU students. We had some that were only for queer and trans international students. We had a couple that were specifically for students with disabilities. We also ran a focus group or 2. I don't run them, the students do, so that's not as handy in my brain, but we ran focus groups with students in the trades, understanding that queer and trans students in the trades probably have some different experiences than students in other places. And we ran a couple focus groups on substance use as well. So we have so much data. This is our first presentation. So we've been working really hard to present this to you. We've decided to only focus on the KPU data for this presentation, given the audience, and as well as our time and it being December. And we're trying very hard to get the rest of the data analyzed, but there will be more specific findings, hopefully, that we'll be able to present soon. And if you're interested in any of those, feel free to reach out to me, or if you feel like there's somewhere at KPU we could have some kind of impact, we'd be happy to present a section of the data. I don't know if we'll ever be able to present all of it at the same time because it's so much, but we're hoping to do a number of presentations. So the research questions, we're focused on the intersectional experiences, like I said, and also the unique challenges and benefits due to LGBTQ plus students experience at teaching-focused institutions in the Lower Mainland. And that's very much driven by us wanting to create recommendations that are meaningful and I guess what's the word I'm looking for, like effective, practical, because we had some great success in phase 1 of KPU. Certain KPU departments were really receptive and made some changes based on the study findings, and we're hoping that practice will continue and that we'll be able to present some more nuanced data to improve services not only at KPU but also at the 6 other institutions. So next I will hand it over to Luka.
Yeah, thanks, Tara. So I'll be speaking to the demographics of the survey participants and then a few key findings relating to those demographics. So as Sarah mentioned, we had 337 people participate in the survey, and most of those participants were at KPU, so 195, compared to the other institutions, which were also represented in smaller numbers. In terms of their faculty or school, most were in arts, so 101 students, followed by science and business next. So arts was actually a bit overrepresented compared to what we know about the KPU student body as a whole, and business students were a bit underrepresented. This is partially due to kind of the international domestic breakdown. So what we had in the survey was also that domestic students were a little bit overrepresented. So they made up 74% of our sample compared to 26% who were international. And what I know from surveys my office does is that international students are less likely to be 2SLGBTQ or to at least disclose that. And most international students are more concentrated in business, which helps to understand why that faculty was a little bit underrepresented. In terms of sexual orientation, students had a wide range of options to select from. They could also select more than one option. So bisexual was the most frequently selected category, with 41% of students selecting that option. Being able to select multiple was particularly helpful for questioning students. So we had 11% select questioning, and those students often selected one or two other categories as well. In terms of trans experience, we asked students about this, and 28% said that they were trans, 10% said that they were questioning, and 62% said no, that they were cisgender. For specific gender identities, we found that most of the sample were women, so 54%. We had 31% who were non-binary, and the plus mark there is just to denote that that category was broader when we actually presented it as a survey option. So it included gender fluid, gender queer, and gender nonconforming, as well as a more umbrella category. And again, students could select more than one option, given that around 10% selected questioning, and then they were able to select other categories as needed. In terms of racial identity, the most frequently selected category was European at 46%, followed by Indian, Filipino, and Chinese, Latin American, and another South Asian category. All of these categories and the question itself was modeled after the recent BC demographic survey, which was run by the government of BC, and I'm happy to speak to more details around that if anyone is interested in how this question was constructed. In terms of religion, a little over half of our sample said that they were non-religious, and the next most frequently selected categories were Christianity and another religion. So this was our write-in option, where students could provide us with a bit more detail. And within that category, we had a lot of students express kind of questioning, so maybe having been raised in a certain religion, but leaning towards not being certain or not practicing as much anymore, or being spiritual, but not particularly religious. Also asked students if a wide variety of disabilities, conditions, or neurodiverse categories applied to them. And a major finding from the survey was we had around 2/3 of our sample say that they had a mental health condition. We also found 35% selected ADHD, 15% selected autism, and then 10% each mentioned having a drug or alcohol addiction or a learning disability. So one of the key pieces around this is some follow-up questions we asked about service use. So we see that these categories are fairly frequent and widespread. So we wanted to know if students were aware of services available to them. So what we found was that 20% said that they used accessibility services and 20% have used counseling services. So given the high prevalence of what was selected in the previous question, it does seem that this is perhaps lower rates of use than we might expect. So given that, we asked the students who said that they were aware of the service but didn't use it, why that was the case. So in the case of accessibility services, around 3/4 said that they just didn't need the service, but the next highest category selected was that they weren't sure what services were actually provided. And then for counseling services, has a bit more of a range, but we did find that 1/3 of students said that they thought they didn't need it. And then we also found that 23% said that they didn't think staff would know how to work with people of their background. And in the survey itself, we provided some examples in that response option. So background meaning cultural background, ability, sexual orientation, or gender, things like that. We also found that same percentage said that they hadn't had the time yet, but were intending to use the service in the future. And then an additional 18% said that they just weren't sure what services counseling might be able to provide them. Also asked a handful of questions relating to students' finances. So what we found in terms of hours worked per week is that most students do work, and the most frequently selected category of people working was in that less than 10 hours per week range. That being said, there are around a quarter of students who work 20 hours a week or more during their studies. Another major finding of the study, and a fairly concerning one, was relating to food security. So we provided them with a few different statements and asked how often this was true for them in the last 3 months. So what we found was that 45% of students said that they ate less than they needed because they didn't have enough money for food, either sometimes or often within the last 3 months. And 53% of students said, again, sometimes or often in the last 3 months, they couldn't afford healthy meals in particular. So the most relevant service for that piece is financial aid services, and we found that 31% have used that service. Of the students who were aware of the service but didn't use it, we asked why they hadn't, and around half of students said that they didn't need it. Others were intending to use the service but just hadn't had the time. There was also a bit of a lack of awareness of what services were provided or how to access the service as well. The final piece I'll speak to is around where students are living. It's not particularly surprising. We have around half of the students who are in the Surrey, White Rock, or North Delta area, another 16% in the Fraser Valley, which included Langley, 14% are in Vancouver, which also included North and West Van, and then 13% in the Richmond, Ladner, Tawasin area. So given this, we also asked some questions about how they felt about where they were living. And what we found was that 60% of students said that their city is welcoming of 2SLGBTQ plus people. That being said, we also found that around half of students feared discrimination in their city based on their sexual orientation. And for trans or gender diverse participants, 70% of them feared discrimination in their city based on their gender identity. So taken together, all these factors are what they are bringing into the institution and into the classroom, and hopefully helps inform a bit about our other findings. And so I'll hand that off to Camille to take over from here.
Thank you very much, Luka. Sorry. There we go. So we're just gonna talk a bit about our findings, specifically regarding campus climate. So we asked students how out they were at school and outside of school, and we found that most participants had come out to at least some people at school, but more were out about their identities off campus. So about 30% of them, 30% of queer students and 35% of trans students were not out at school, compared to 8% of queer and 12% of trans students are not out outside of school. So when asked why participants had chosen not to come out, the majority said that the information just wasn't relevant to discuss. However, 49% said they weren't comfortable sharing the information with other people, and 46 said that it was because they were afraid of homophobic or transphobic reactions. So nearly 50% of students felt like other students could tell their sexual orientation before they told everyone or told anyone, but this visibility wasn't always portrayed in a negative light. So both survey and focus group participants shared that visibility is something that they tend to use to both identify themselves and others as community members. And this was typically done through what they mentioned or what they called signaling, where students would typically wear pins or decorate their bags and wares with stickers, and sort of through that, they would be able to locate other queer and trans students. One student says, I'm not very subtle. I wear pride pins pretty much everywhere to make it very obvious that I am a safe person for other queer folk to approach. So we found that the 2S LGBTQIA plus community, including community on campus, was very important to students. So 77% of participants wanted to meet other queer and trans students at KPU, and the importance of community came up consistently in focus groups. One student says, I would say that being part of queer community and having queer friends is something that is huge for me. Having somewhere to turn to makes a huge difference, and having people that can understand that experience is also really important to me. So despite many students wanting to connect with their 2S LGBTQI plus peers, only 21% of students felt part of their school's queer and trans community. And additionally, we found that only 53% of students felt like there was an active queer and trans community at their school. So only 19% of students accessed student-run clubs, supports, and events for queer and trans students, and 29% of students did not know any on campus. We found that BIPOC students, students with disabilities, international students faced additional barriers to accessing community. So 40% of BIPOC students felt that it was hard to make queer and trans friends who shared their ethnic background, and many also expressed that they were uncomfortable being open about their sexual orientation and gender identity around those from their ethnic community. In focus groups, some disabled students discussed feeling isolated from their queer and trans peers because of their identity, because of their disability, and they found it difficult to access queer and trans events and spaces because they weren't accessible. Further, only 21% of disabled students felt part of the disabled or neurodiverse community at school. And further, 30% of international students felt that because they were international students, they were isolated among their queer and trans peers. 47% also hid their gender identity and sexual orientation around their international student peers. So this highlights certain areas where queer and trans students' needs are not being met. And I'll pass it on to Liam.
Sorry, I had my mic muted. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about safety. We found that only 63% of students were comfortable expressing their identity on campus. And in focus groups, we did also have some students discuss either feeling uncomfortable or unsafe on campus or in classes. Some students also mentioned that some of KPU's outward messages of support for queer and trans students, including having like some pride-specific advertisements or the rainbow crosswalks that we have on campuses, didn't really reflect the way that queer and trans students were actually treated on campus. One student said that KPU is advertising themselves and they're making money off the idea that they're a safe place for LGBTQ people, and they're not. And in the survey that we did, we found that out of fear of homophobia and transphobia, 36% of students avoided coming out to their peers. Another 17% avoided making friends or getting to know their classmates. 17% avoided using washrooms on campus, and 12% changed the way that they dressed. We also found that a lot of students had witnessed homophobia and transphobia at KPU, with 67% reporting they'd heard people make jokes related to 2S LGBTQIA plus people, and 87% reporting that they'd heard or seen people use insults related to 2S LGBTQIA plus people. We further found that around 18% of participants had witnessed another student be bullied for their identity, and 14% had personally experienced bullying. And while we didn't have a lot of questions on racism and ableism on campus, we did also find that 31% of BIPOC students had heard 2SLGBTQIA plus peer at school either make a racist or culturally insensitive comment, and 48% of disabled students had heard another student on campus make an ableist comment. Although a lot of students had experienced or witnessed bullying and harassment, only 60% of students said they would actually feel comfortable reporting something that they witnessed or experienced. And the most common reason students didn't feel comfortable reporting incidents were that they wanted to stay anonymous with 52%, they were afraid of retaliation with another 52%, they didn't understand the reporting process with 51%, or they were worried that they wouldn't be taken seriously with 44%. And in focus groups, we did have a few participants who discussed experiences trying to report incidents, but either being turned away or generally dissatisfied with the support that they received. And on top of that, we did also have some students who personally hadn't tried to make reports, but discussed kind of being dissuaded by hearing other students discuss their negative experiences. With one student saying, I know a lot of people have gone to report incidents and they've just been shut down or rejected or turned away, especially if it's an incident regarding their identity. And I'm going to pass it over to Kai.
Hello, everyone. So I'll just go a little about our findings on the students' classroom experience. Overall, students reported positive experience with the instructors, with 81% feeling that they had instructors who care about their well-being. Of students who did come out to the instructors, 84% felt that the instructors were very or mostly supportive of the sexual orientation, while 76% felt that they were mostly or very supportive of their gender identity. So in the open-ended survey questions, students also expressed that they appreciated when instructors made an effort to improve inclusion in the classroom by using inclusive language, including course material that represents diverse experiences, and clearly stating that homophobia and transphobia are not welcomed in the classroom. And when asked about this, one quote I got was, instructors using inclusive language that respects diverse gender identities and sexual orientations creates an atmosphere of acceptance. However, some students did report negative experiences with the instructors. Some of these experiences included misgendering of trans students, using outdated language or sharing incorrect and biased information on 2SLGBTQIA plus people, and not acting on homophobia or transphobia when they happened in the classroom. We also found that 33% of BIPOC students heard an instructor make a racist or culturally insensitive comment, and 34% of students avoid coming out to the instructors out of fear of homophobia or transphobia. One of the students said that one of these negative experiences was due to outdate or restrict ideas of the crouching humor, and that it was frustrating and distracting from the learning environment. In regards to representation, queer representation in course materials, only 34% of students felt that these topics were well represented. And in focus groups and open-ended survey questions, some students shared that the course contained misinformation on queer identities and experiences. However, it is important to note that we did find some students, particularly those in sciences and trades, that did not felt that it was important or relevant to include this representation in the classes. In regards to positive experiences, one participant said that it is incorporating diverse experiences and voices from the 2SLGBTQIA+ community into the curriculum, And one of the negative experiences reported was a participant that had a teacher with a very outdated textbook, which included a lot of misinformation and accidental transphobia. And the teacher told me that I didn't make the textbook, so it wasn't her fault. We asked a similar question specifically of Indigenous study students and found that only 38% felt that they were represented in their course material. 62% felt instructors made an effort to include Indigenous knowledge when applicable, and 85% felt that Indigenous topics were handled with respect in the classroom. So in regards to how students felt supported, we found that 71% of students felt that they had the support they needed to be successful at school. However, 51% shared that they struggled to get all the coursework done. Most students neither agreed or disagreed with the statement that decision makers at the school did a good job of supporting queer students. And now I will pass it over to Destiny.
Thank you, Kai. So now let's talk about some recommendations that we have based on what we found in our research. Now, before I begin with talking about how to interact with queer and trans students in a respectful manner, I want to remind everyone that each student could have different preferences. For example, some students may prefer more low-key support, but some students may prefer more explicit support. So when in doubt, ask them how to support them the best. And now for some general pointers for interacting with queer and trans students. So don't assume what pronouns someone uses based on their name or their appearance. If someone shares their pronouns with you, use them. Don't expect 2SLGBTQIA+ people to educate you on 2SLGBTQIA+ issues and experiences. Instead, put in the time and effort to do your own research and show up with that. Don't single out 2SLGBTQIA+ people, for example, only asking people who you believe are trans or gender non-conforming to share their pronouns. Instead, you can ask everyone. This also puts off some of the pressure on our queer students. If someone tells you that they are 2SLGBTQIA+, please ask for their permission before sharing that information with others. For example, some students may prefer to be out within some communities, but not others, so it's important to ask for specification. And now here are some points of action you can all take on campus. One of our recommendations is to have 2SLGBTQ+ spaces and events on all KPU campuses. And for the Surrey campus, we would like a larger space, as the current Price Center in Birch 240 is too small to accommodate the students who want to access the space. In general, there was more demand for more frequent events for 2SLGBTQIA students, both organized by the university and by 2SLGBTQIA+ student groups. Another recommendation is to have more and better ways to learn about events and activities relevant to queer students, such as a mailing list specifically for queer students, for queer events, or having a social media account focused on pride events. Another recommendation is to have training for all KPU employees to prepare them to work with 2SLGBTQIA+ students. And last but not least, there's also a demand for more all-gender neutral washrooms on all campuses. And here are some recommendations specifically for instructors. A lot of students ask that instructors directly address homophobia and transphobia when it comes in classrooms, whether it be with the course material, in classmates, etc. Students also want instructors to discuss resources and events available for queer students in the classroom and have resources available on a course syllabus at the beginning of the semester. Instructors can also model inclusive language and behavior in the classroom, as well as other communication channels, such as their department's websites, forums that serve students, posters for events, etc. Students would also like instructors to incorporate 2SLGBTQIA+ representation in class materials. This could be through the examples you use, the authors of the materials you share, the themes you discuss in class, etc. Another recommendation is to engage with educational materials and courses to increase your competency as an instructor to work with 2SLGBTQIA+ students, and where possible, stay up to date with queer issues and events. Students also ask that instructors are using class lists to show students' preferred names to avoid dead naming and misgendering. And last but not least, this is a general guide for mostly everything, is to be open to feedback from 2SLGBTQIA+ students. And now I pass on to Tara.
Great job, everyone. I know it's a bit tricky with doing our first presentation, and we have such a big team, and you all did amazing. So I want to acknowledge that we had a number of funders for this project, which included the 0.6 PD fund, the KSA, the Student Research Innovation Grant for Kai in particular. I also want to express my deep gratitude to all the participants who answered the survey and participated in the focus groups. I acknowledge the co-investigators at the beginning. We're a very large team. I also realized I didn't do a great job of introducing the students and they're not students, the research team members who aren't. So everyone who presented today, as well as Kayla, are active members on the research team. They are all KPU students or KPU alumni. Most come from arts, but we also have Destiny from design. We have an international student. We are. I'm so deeply grateful to do this work with students, and this work is driven by them, and they are incredibly hard workers, and so I want to acknowledge them as well. So thank you all for working with me. You're all amazing. So now we would like to open it up for questions, and thank you for your time, and we would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, and I'll pass it over to Zahia, our moderator.
Thank you, Tara, and your wonderful team. Like, this is a very important research. So I'm very happy that you managed to share with us the findings and your recommendations. And now we open for questions. You can raise your hand to ask a question, or like a virtual hand, or you can type up a question in the chat. If you don't have any questions, you're more welcome to share comments and views or experiences. Okay, Holly?
So I guess my only question is sort of what's the next stage? This is such rich data. So I think you had mentioned that the previous presentation had been an earlier stage. This is kind of the second one. What's the plan with this work going into the future?
First, we have to disseminate all the information we have. So we're still doing data analysis. We have a number of presentations coming up. The research team has been working super hard and has submitted 4 abstracts to conferences coming up in the spring. So we'll be quite active, I think. And we want to share the information as broadly as we can, and hopefully it has impacts at not only KPU but other universities. And then I don't know if for the bigger phase 3, that will very much be driven by the team and what they want to do going forward. But again, we'd be very happy to talk about collaboration and having different folks involved as well.
Camille, would you like to add to what Tara is saying?
Yeah, I was just going to speak to that a little bit. As Tara mentioned at the beginning, the survey sort of encompassed a bunch of different themes, and we sort of tailored some of the focus groups to link to those. So that's sort of, the big dissemination thing, but sort of looking at these specific differences between demographics, the experiences of, students who are dealing with substance use or students who have disabilities and stuff. So that's sort of what that's our main goal.
Thank you, Camille. Danny?
Yeah, first I want to congratulate everybody. It's really cool, great work. I've been marking presentations for the past few weeks, and my number one question that I ask students is the question I'm going to ask you, and that is, what is your main message or take-home message? From what we learned today, we learned a lot of useful tidbits, but what does it all mean?
Thank you, Danny.
Does anyone want to take it? Camille, you look like you're ready.
I mean, I didn't see anybody's hand go up. But sort of it's really like highlighting that there are these discrepancies between the experiences of, queer and trans students, but even further within that, different demographics. And sort of our big goal is to hopefully, take this information and hand it off to people who are sort of not the policymakers, but, the people who can make some of the bigger changes. Because unfortunately, as students and faculty and staff, sometimes we're a little bit limited. But it is really just sharing the message and hoping that, once again, we can't convince people to act differently, to behave differently, but we're hoping to sort of like illuminate and shed light on certain challenges that queer and trans students are facing. I'll pass it on to Liam, though.
I think very similar to what you said, just that there's still work to be done in a lot of areas, not just with queer and trans students, but with BIPOC students, with Indigenous students, with disabled students. I think that's a really big thing to highlight, because I do think that there is like sometimes a sense that a lot of work has been done and a lot of progress has been made. But I think this helps highlight that students are still facing a lot of barriers that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Liam. Kai?
And to continue adding, right, to what Camille and Liam already said, we focused a lot on the findings on the classroom. So it's kind of like, this is the information that we have for instructors, and is there enough being done in your classroom? If there isn't, what else you can do? It's more of like Camille said, we can make anyone do anything, and Destiny pointed out too, people are different, so it might be different needs, but yeah, sharing the information to help maybe make queer students, BIPOC students, and Indigenous students more comfortable within the classroom and help their learning.
Thank you, Kai. Destiny?
Thank you. And I agree with what everyone has said in the past, and also to reiterate that, like Kai said, I talked about in my recommendations, everyone is different, and it's important to have that individualist approach instead of homogenizing all queer and trans students and treat them the same, because even though that is equality, it's not equity, and we are trying to achieve equity in KPU. So that is my most important takeaway from my view. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Danny. Other questions or comments?
There's a couple in the chat, and I'm happy. I'm going to leave Carol's question for other members of the team, but I will speak to Jillian's comment around. Oh, it looks like Luka's already responding. Jillian's comment about making things accessible. So we absolutely want to we did a lot of presentations, as some of you know, for the phase one, and we absolutely want to do, we have some students with design experience and expertise and interest. So we want to do like shorter kind of pamphlets on key pieces around knowledge translation, key pieces of results. We also are looking for funding, or, you know, it's definitely with what we're thinking about in terms of other visual representations, like through some queer art, perhaps. We are presenting, well, we've put in applications to present, say, like VCC's teaching and learning, as well as some more academic conferences, and there'll be more we present at, and there are manuscripts already drafted and planned, but we absolutely want to do a broad range of knowledge translation to make it accessible, to also get it in the hands of students and the Pride Society, which there's a number of folks here who are executives at KPU Pride Society, so they can also use it as well, or get it into the hands of students. And also, I very much welcome ideas on and suggestions how to creatively get the knowledge out there.
Thank you, Tara. I can see Carol's question in the chat. So Carol is asking about the finding regarding students not being comfortable reporting misconduct and discriminatory actions against Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ students. Did you have a sense to whom that the students are reluctant to report?
Yeah, so I think Luka and Liam pretty much answered this. It was typically relating to the Student Rights and Responsibilities Office. And issues had to do particularly with like anonymity and fears of retaliation from either the person that they're reporting or even the staff at SRO. So this was mostly what was mentioned, but as Liam did state, this did include reporting discrimination to people like the KSA or the Students' Rights Office in the KSA, their instructors, and then other internal organizations.
Just one other piece about the survey. So we didn't say like, do you know how to report an incident to the SRO? Like, it wasn't specified. So the students could be interpreting that in a few different ways, but given it's a formal report, that's what we were trying to kind of get at. But we didn't name the office specifically. So it came up in a variety of different ways.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Tara, and your amazing group of students and co-researchers. As always, my heart is full because you do such an amazing job, and just so much gratitude for the work that you're doing. And we see that reflected in the comments as well from other people. So that's the first thing I want to say. This is great. I guess my question is, it's not really a question, but like, okay, so I'm like a straight white male who's continually learning and trying to figure out how to make a more welcoming environment for all students, including queer and trans. I really appreciate the slide with the instructions for, sorry, the slide on, you know, how instructors like myself, you know, can further this. I think one thing, and this is just a suggestion, and I actually took down my hand because I was like, I don't know if this is really a good idea or not. Because I don't want to put like the work onto you guys. And I think it is incumbent upon instructors to do the work ourselves. But I'll go ahead and I'll say my idea, even if it's a bad idea, you can shoot it down. I think like it may be helpful to have like a one-pager, like a PDF, or something that can be really easily incorporated into Moodle. Because at the beginning of every class, I've got my usual patter that I give, you know, welcome to Criminology, blah, 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 blah. And I go through my thing and I try to set the tone for the class. And just having like a one-page sort of set of resources that I can click through, say, here's where you find resources that are here to support queer and trans students. And if that could then be sent if it's not already in existence. And this is why I put down my hand, because, oh my God, maybe I'm outing my own lack of prep here. But if that could be then sent around widely to all instructors at KPU as a research output, then that might be just one way.
Thank you,
you.
Mark.
Sorry, I just want to double check with the team. Like, it's okay if I mention the thing that Liam made, right? Okay, so sort of Liam created this fantastic resource. It was developed for participants of our focus groups, and I think the survey it's linked, but it was for the focus groups. We had them available, and Liam compiled this big list of resources for queer and trans people of various demographics across the Lower Mainland, and I do believe there is a section that focuses on KPU specific resources. And I believe that we can make available to people.
Thank you, Camille. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I have a question for Tara, for your team. You guys are all, is that a question? Okay, that's a comment, all right. So I just want to ask the students, how was your experience working on this research? Like, how was it? Like, not just the skills that you've learned, but the experience and the emotional experience working on it, some challenges that you faced, and how did you deal with it?
One of their main challenges is probably dealing with me not being very organized. It's okay, you can say that. And this is why I have an amazing team around me.
Kai?
Yeah, I will say though that it's very, very refreshing to see it's not just me. So it has been, I joined pretty recently, and so I'm still getting the hangs of it, still learning how to do a more formal analysis. Was my first time running focus group, so I'm learning so much that I could do a whole presentation on that, but it has been very enriching. I think the biggest challenge for me was actually hearing the experiences of students that translates to a lot of my experiences in focus groups, and knowing there isn't really much I can do to solve that, because it's not much up to me. So that is why I also am so proud to be part of this research, and because it feels like at least if I can get the information out there, I can be doing something to help, right? But I think this was like running the focus groups were pretty emotionally challenging to hear the negative experiences.
Thank you, Kai. Any other additions from the team? Okay, all right, Liam, yes. Oh, Destiny or Liam?
Liam can go first.
Okay.
I was just gonna say I agree with that as a challenge. But I think, yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think it's a challenge, but also what makes it feel really like fulfilling and important to be involved in the work. Yeah.
Thank you, Liam. Destiny?
Thank you. I also agree with Kai and Liam. It is very fulfilling to see myself represented in the work and the data I'm looking at. I'm also a fairly new addition to the team. And one more personal thing I am navigating is that, I guess, kind of going back to the fulfilling part, it's kind of like positive and negative, seeing myself like represented, because while I was working on the research, I have also been experiencing housing insecurity and food insecurity, but fortunately now, as of this week, I have stable housing, which I want to share with everyone because it's important to talk about this and destigmatize these potentially really taboo topics, because I could not have made this far, been able to do my studies and to participate on the research team without support from my classmates, my instructors, other KPU staff. And it's people like me that you could be supporting and helping them build a successful future. So I really wanted to emphasize that and kind of put like a face to maybe a statistic. Perhaps we are few people, and with your support, we can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Destiny. Okay, so we have time for one more question or a comment. Okay, all right. So I have one last question that I want to ask you. Camille, earlier you said what you're trying to do when Danny asked you what is the goal for this, you know, for the research, what's the message? And you said we want to raise awareness. But I personally think as an educational institute, we need to do more than just raising awareness. We need to change. So I want to hear from you, how can we change this culture on our campus? You know, like one suggestion, two suggestions. What do you think? Kai. Oh, Camille or Kai?
I was going to say I'm going to let Kai handle this one.
Okay. Okay. I think that is actually a lot of things should be done, but one thing I am personally very focused on is classroom experience to queer students. And I think what needs to be done, and not just towards queer students, but like BIPOC and Indigenous students as well, is for instructors to integrate queer experiences, Indigenous experiences into the course material, regardless of whether or not the course is about queer people. Because oftentimes I feel it's very segmented. And so when I take a class that is, for example, astronomy, I don't feel comfortable being out there because there is nothing that I say, hey, this environment is safe for me, right? And that can have a strong impact. So I think it's very hard to change an institutional culture, but it's definitely easier to change the classroom environment and go from there. So I would say that is a great way to start.
Thank you, Kai. I'll remember that. Camille?
Sorry, I was just going to jump off of what Kai was saying, because I think starting from the classroom that's a fantastic way to go about it. And I think another big thing for faculty is that, like, it's okay to intervene if you see a student getting discriminated by other students. Students, when you know, we saw this in both focus groups and in the qualitative answers on the survey, but students know when you see it happening and nothing happens. And they take that on with them. And, you know, it often leads to isolation. Students are less likely to spend time on campus. They're just going to be in and out of class. And it sucks. So don't, you know, like, it's okay to step in, even just to like ask the student if they're okay afterwards. But sort of across the, you know, this was an issue that we saw raised multiple times when other students were saying discriminatory things in class. Instructors sort of just stood by. So
thank you, Camille. And I can see that it's time. Thank you so much, guys, for this very important and much needed work. So thank you for your presentation, and thank you all for coming to our to the art speaker series today. We look forward to having you in our next presentation in January 15th. I'll share the schedule in the chat so that you can always access it. So thank you, everyone. Bye, everyone.